Okay, I do want to go through the other system changes for youth. There's a number of new barriers. We've either removed things or renamed them. For instance, long-term unemployed is a new barrier under WIOA. Didn't exist under WIA. There was a question earlier about the other barrier, locally defined. Again, it existed under WIA, is no longer one of the barriers that is collected under WIOA. We've changed limited English to English language learner, changed foster child to current prior foster child, etc. The funding source page, like we talked about for adults and dislocated workers, should only reflect those funding sources that are acceptable or the youth should be eligible for. Regarding specific activities, you can refer to Table 7 in the handouts for, I think, more detailed information. There's a number of changes here. We have renamed or relabeled employment services to work experiences. That'll just be a label change, so anyone that you had under employment services will now show up as work experiences for youth. You'll no longer see employment services after July 1st as an activity to select. It'll be work experience. The core self-service activity category that you see under WIA is just now self-service. And summer youth opportunities is no longer going to be a separate activity that you can select under WIOA. It's going to be a category for one of the other activities. Another change, when you have a legacy WIA person, someone who's already exited, after July 1st, when you try to go to the enter activities screen for that person, you're no longer going to see the entire list of activities like you see right now. Since that person has exited, the only activity that can be entered is the follow-up services. So you're going to be taken directly to the follow-up services activity to create a new one. So again, you've got a legacy WIA person. After July 1st, you try and they've exited, excuse me, and you're trying to put in an activity. The only activity that will be allowed will be the follow-up services. And for employment services, again, we're now renaming that to work experiences. There's going to be two new categories underneath or within that activity. Here's where we've put the summer youth employment opportunities, but we've also added pre-apprenticeship as one of the categories underneath work experiences. So if you're putting a youth into a summer youth employment opportunity, it's now going to be under work experiences and one of the categories there. So our existing people who are in that activity, again, summer youth for WIA, it was a separate activity. We're going to leave those activities unchanged if the summer youth employment opportunities has been ended. But if for some reason it's still open, somebody that you currently have in this activity, with the transition to WIOA, again, this person becomes a WIOA carry-in. We're going to convert that summer youth employment activities to work experiences and select the activity type of summer youth employment opportunities as the activity type within the work experiences. All the other data fields will be migrated over, so basically there's nothing that you need to do with this as far as data entry other than end the activity or put in subsequent data entry. Anything you've already put in will be converted or migrated over to the new activity. And this is just kind of a representation of what the summer youth employment opportunities activity currently looks like and what it will look like under the work experiences activity to which is being migrated. For education services, we have 3 new categories within that activity for dropout prevention, recovery strategies, education concurrent with work prep, and financial literacy. And for additional support for youth, we also have 3 new categories under the activity related to labor market information, post-secondary, and exposure to post-secondary educational opportunities. For the leadership development activity, it's going to pretty much stay as it is, except we are removing the exposure to post-secondary educational activities since that's now available under the additional support for youth. And finally, for follow-up, we made a big change here. We added a new category or a new type for other, and then you can explain it in the comments. So I think at the basic level, the activities haven't changed much, with the summer youth being the exception where that's going to be migrated to the work experiences. Other than that, we've more or less added new categories that you can select, categories that are required from the WIOA language, etc. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes or a lot of confusing changes for activities, just some additional selections available. Any other any questions at all for activities? Okay, for the outcome screen for youth, for the most part, the change here is going to be for the legacy WIA. We're adding both the second and fourth quarters after exit. Right now, we only collect first and third, as you're familiar with, for any and all of the different components under the outcome screens. Under WIOA, so for WIOA Carry-In, WIOA Pure WIOA, you will see the new layout that Paula talked about with the different tabs for the outcome screens. But even for the legacy WIAs, you will see that second and fourth quarters are being added for all of the different outcome categories, so that these can be reported appropriately for performance should this person fall into WIOA performance. Yep. There's nothing in the regulations like that, and I'm sure people have made comments like that in the proposed rules, but as to whether or not that would eventually be taken up as the official definition of performance remains to be seen. So certainly nothing official, Bernice, that says that they could be or would be excluded because they're in full-time post-secondary with this part-time job, a couple hours a week. The one thing I did want to mention here, and this was a question that we got during lunch, had to do with exiting people who are WIOA carryovers, or carry-ins rather, but exiting them back to a time period prior to July 1st. And the question was, are you going to be able to do that? So let's say that you had somebody that was registered in 2014 and was still active on July 1st, 2015, but maybe in mid-July or heck, December, you decide, okay, this person should have been exited to June 15th, 2015. So in effect, that person was a WIOA carryover for a while. When you put the activity end dates in, that person's going to exit back to a time period prior to July 1st, which really makes them one of our legacy WIA. The question was, will that be allowed? And yes, the system will allow you to do that. You might get some funky looking stuff in the MIS related to the screens, because the WIOA carryovers are going to have, you know, the WIOA screens for outcomes and et cetera. So it might not look exactly like a WIA legacy that was exited, you know, back in 2014, et cetera. But you will be allowed to put in a retroactive end date for activities and exit that person retroactively, even if that makes them that legacy WIA instead of the WIOA carry-in. Did I get that right, Elka? Did I explain it right? Okay. Like adults and dislocated workers, you'll be able to enter the information for employment, but you'll also be able to enter post-secondary, military, or apprenticeship information, again, for all quarters, first through fourth quarter after exit. And like adults and dislocated workers, you will be able to copy information from the preceding quarter into the subsequent quarters. So once you enter the information for the first quarter, if you know that they're still in that exact same stuff for second, it's just click the copy button and it will auto-populate all those fields into the second quarter and so on. And this is just another look at that where instead of create, because we do have information for the first quarter after exit, you can create and copy the subsequent quarters. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Paula for a little bit to talk about some of the other features that have been changed in OSMIS.
You may have seen some of the screenshots on some of the different OSMIS features, but I want to kind of talk about them all in this specific section. Some of you that work with PATH may already be familiar with some of these different features, but it probably will be new to a handful of people. So the first part that I want to talk about is, I guess, the new layout here, or user interface. Here we have the customer search results screen with all of the different programs, whether she is WIA or WIOA. You're going to see a new title that says showing 1 to 10 of 10. Okay, so if there's 2 pages, you'll have the option to move to page number 2. You'll also see arrows up or down on several of the columns, and that will sort either ascendingly or descendingly. And then you'll also see the print and export to Excel options. Some other features are the search box, and really what that is more like a filter. So in this case, I searched for adult, and what it does is narrow all the information that's on the screen to include only those areas that include the letters that are included in adult. Okay, so you can see in this case it narrowed down from the 10 to the 4 adult registrations, and you can search by any search string in that search box. The WIA header, this is how it is now. There's just some fields that are outdated in there that are still shown, like converted, assignment group, end of service restriction. Those are outdated, and therefore they are gone with the new WIA header, or I'm sorry, the new WIOA header. The new WIOA header includes a participant name, customer ID, program, reg date, and the status, which will either list exited or active. And then the footer, with WIA, it really had some limited data, and then WIOA that has been expanded to include some dates, like who created the pre-registration, who created the registration, the status, the MWA, and when it was created, and then also who most recently updated it. It's automatically calculated for you. It's not anything that you have to do manually. And then you'll also see the tab, the active tab that you're on is green. You're going to see the asterisk next to required fields. Right now it's a red arrow. We have changed that to an asterisk, or will change it to an asterisk come July 1st. You'll also see in this case, I have an error on the barriers tab, and that's indicated by a red triangle. So when I hit submit, every tab that contains an error will have a red triangle on it, so you know exactly the tab that you need to go back and fix. You'll also see a lot of the date fields have a picture of a calendar, so you can click on the calendar will show up, and you can simply select a date. You can change the month, you can change the year. With the date fields that have business rules that are tied to that particular date field, OSMIS will only allow you to type in or search dates within the calendar that are considered valid dates for that particular date field, the business rule of that date field. You'll see the drop down where it offers a menu is highlighted in blue or has blue background, and then the fields where you type in something, like in this case the wage, it's just a open field with a white background.